I'm Grant Bartley from Philosophy Now magazine, and you're listening to the Philosophy Now radio show on Resonance FM. Today we'll be talking about transhumanism and posthumanism. As I understand it, posthumanism thinks about what humanity is evolving into, using high technologies of various types, including computers, bioengineering, drugs and social programming. And transhumanism is about the sort of Ubermensch we'll become on the way to being the new species. To discuss if we should engineer ourselves and what the future has in hold for us, I have with me Debra Shaw from the University of East London, Blay Whitby from the University of Sussex, and David Gamez from Imperial College London. Bucky Muttel will be providing live music on the Chapman Stick. So before we go on, I've heard that it's a fundraising day today. So if you want to support the work of Resonance and all these wonderful programmes, you can text RZFM14, then the £, and either 5 or 10 to 7007 to donate via text message. You can donate using your credit or debit card. Simply go to resonancefm.com and click on the donate widget on the right hand side of the screen. Or if you can make cheques payable to Resonance FM and send them to Resonance 104.4 FM, 144 Borough High Street, London, SE1 1LB, UK, and I'll give that address out later. But back to posthumanism and transhumanism. What about my definition of those concepts? Does anybody want to add anything to those definitions?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind.
Debbie?
Yeah. In some senses, yeah, you're quite correct. One definition of posthumanism is like to accelerate human evolution to the next stage.
Right.
Which for some people, like, for instance, Max Moore of the Extropy Institute, means uploading brains into computers, cryogenic suspension, like freezing our cells until, medical science moves on. But it is actually a contested term. There's some of us that see that kind of definition to be ethically somewhat suspect. And we talk about posthumanism more as a way of challenging what it means to be human in the first place.
Okay, so it's not necessarily to do with the future, it's just maybe a different perspective on things.
Yeah, it's a different perspective. It's certainly a political perspective, and it does have something to do with the future, because it may point the way to rethinking the human, so that it isn't a category that people necessarily aspire to.
Okay, David, what were you
for example, we thought of man as the centre of the universe for the last 500 years or so, and then one of the approaches to posthumanism, in the sense that Deborah's talking about, is in the sense that we're sort of now we find that we're not particularly special as a species, we're not particularly special in space, we're not special in any particular way. So.
Why aren't we? I mean, we're the only ones that can use abstract concepts, for instance. Isn't that very special?
We have some special things, but at the same time, we're very much embedded in a world. We're not genetically special in any way.
Yeah.
All this kind of stuff.
Okay, Blay, what did you want to add?
I don't think a lot hangs on definitions, actually.
No.
Where I agree with Deborah is that there are quite a number of people who are enthusiasts for technology that it looks like being able to modify us in a very big way.
Yeah.
And as an ethicist, I'm very worried about where this can end up. I should point out that the World Transhumanist Association changed its name to Humanity Plus, but there are still many people who behave in a cultish fashion here. That they have a lot of enthusiasm for various sorts of high technology.
All right. I think we'll probably get into that. But first, could you tell me, or tell us all, what your particular interests are in the intersection of technology and human destiny, please? I'll start with the ladies, please, Deborah.
Okay. Having called me a lady, I'm now going to correct you and say I'm not a lady, I'm a feminist.
All right.
And,
can't feminists be ladies?
No.
Anyway.
But we won't go into that. Actually, no. My interest in it is actually through gender politics.
Right.
Because I was developing a theory, if you like, some years ago, where I was thinking through women's relationship to technology.
Right.
And there was always this sense that women were kind of closer to nature, and that men were the ones that produced culture, and that they were the technologically savvy ones, and we just kind of used the technology. And I came across a theorist called Donna J. Haraway, who is very famous now for writing a paper called the Cyborg Manifesto, where she put forward an argument argument that that women, the future for feminism was for women to understand ourselves as cyborgs, to stop claiming that our bodies stopped at the skin, and that we were in some sense, we had a very close relationship to technology, even to go so far as to say that we have evolved with technology rather than that we have evolved and that we use tools. So this is my perspective on posthumanism.
How does that inform what you think about the debate about what the human future is going to be, especially in technological terms?
I think that we need to rethink the human future away from the idea of improving the human, because that implies that we know what improvement means. Okay. We've lived through modernity with this idea of progress, and we've found other races, other species that, to plot somewhere further down the line of evolutions that we can prove that we are the most progressed.
All right.
And so I think if we can use posthumanism to move away from that kind of hierarchisation, then that would be the future.
Okay. All right. Blay, what's your particular interest in this area?
I'm a technology ethicist. I'm active on ethics committees for the Royal Academy, for engineering, BCS, the Chartered Institute for IT, the university, and so on. I think the public need to be aware of very big ethical choices that are being made. Some of these choices are being made without any public consultation by technologists right now. Yes, there's a gender politics aspect to it, but there's very, very little public debate. There's a bunch of enthusiasts, as I say, a bunch of people really pushing this technology.
A debate about what? What would the debate be about?
What do you want? What changes do you want? And you're going to have to allow some changes. You're going to have to make very important choices, and there may be no way back from some of them. I mean, to really situate the ethical debate, there's the World Transhumanist Association used to say, I don't know if they still do, in a paper on their website, that by the end of this century, the difference between improved humans, humanity plus the modified humans, and natural humans, which means us, would be at least as great as the difference between us and chimpanzees. Now, we don't let chimpanzees take ethical decisions for us, and we claim the right, maybe rightly, maybe wrongly, to take ethical decisions for chimpanzees. If that's even half true, even if only a small part of this technology actually works, we're at a very worrying position now. We need some rules. We need guidance. And my experience of people actually working with the technology, working with medical enhancement, working with robots, working with smart homes, working with pharmacological techniques, is they want ethical guidance. They want to know what the public think. But there's a rather limited debate.
Okay, well, hopefully we'll have a little bit of that now. But okay, David, what's your particular area of interest in terms of technology and the future that we're making for ourselves?
Well, part of my work's on sort of neural networks, robotics, this kind of stuff. So, in a sense, I'm one of the evil technologists that Blay's talking about.
So you've got a more positive outlook for the future then?
More fatalist than positive, I think. I think that all this, in my opinion, a lot of this debate is premature, really, because I don't think we really know when or if things are going to change in the way that many of the future-oriented people think they will change. So I'm a little bit fatalist in that sense.
But surely, I mean, now is the time before things really kick off to sort of try and sort out some of the ethical problems, you know?
I think the ethical problems become crystallised when you have technology that actually is transformational, like when Dolly the sheep got cloned.
Oh, right.
That's when all the real legislation
only
about
when
cloning
things start happening, then it becomes important, well, you work in the field of artificial intelligence, like you say. I was going to say, even this early in the game, are there problems how we pursue better computing technology and artificial intelligence, even now?
Well, I think there's this built-in this notion of super rapid progress in technological fields, and
especially computing. Yeah.
Especially computing, but people don't realise in parallel just how difficult and hard it's been. I mean, it's been 60 years or something. We've been working on artificial intelligence, and you can barely get a robot to pick up a banana and stuff like that. And
so you don't think there are ethical problems?
Not yet, because I don't think we've got technology that's sufficiently challenging to merit these kind of very extended discussions in this area.
Maybe later. All right, Blay, you're sort of itching to sort of break in here.
Yeah, I think there are some present-day technologies that are raising ethical issues, and you don't need massive progress in robotics and artificial intelligence to produce some of them. One that's really coming into market now is smart homes. These are automated apartments to support elderly people,
right.
Maybe someone with Alzheimer's or degraded cognitive capacities. And the ethical argument in favour that I often hear is, well, old people are frequently mistreated in care homes and so on. If we can give them this artificial support. And I have to say to David, it doesn't require really any new technology. We're talking about motion sensors, temperature sensors, barcode reader for what goes into the fridge and what comes out of the fridge.
So what's the problem with all this stuff then? It seems like just another application of current technology.
Well, here's a problem. Be interested to hear what the others think about this. One problem is that the technologists are all for it.
Right.
It costs a lot of money, a lot of research money to develop a smart home, but when you've developed it, you want to sell a lot.
Right.
So there's going to be a lot of pressure, a lot of commercial pressure for people to put their granny in an automated apartment rather than look after her. Now, that may be great. That may be a future that we want. We don't want old people around, so let's have the AI look after them. But on the other hand, we might think we don't want to move in that direction. This is kind of coming back to Debra's point about let's have a debate about what it is to be human.
How things could go wrong, couldn't you, if you take a human out of the loop? Deborah?
Well, yeah, I actually quite like the idea of this smart home because as a writer, I just fancy having everything done for me by an AI so that I can concentrate on thinking. It would be quite wonderful. But I don't think that there are new ethical problems with coming technologies.
Right.
I think that we've always had ethical problems with technologies, and one of the biggest problems that we've had is who these technologies are available to.
Okay.
And when Blay was speaking earlier about the people that will be the evolved humans, and there'll be the sort of normal, whatever that is, humans.
The unevolved ones.
Yeah, the unevolved ones, and that we'll have this kind of hierarchy. Well, that's kind of just another way of describing the fact that the rich will be able to pay for something that the poor won't be able to afford. We've got the same ethical problems now as we will have in the future.
We'll talk a bit about the ethics after the break. One question I want to ask you that you indicated that I should ask you is you want to stress two importantly distinct meanings of the term posthumanism. What are they, and what did Michel Foucault say about
Okay, what I want to stress is that what tends to be written about quite a lot in the press is the meaning of posthumanism, which I described earlier, which I think sort of Blay's been talking about a little bit, which is the evolved human, the human that is actually dispensing with the flesh, getting rid of the body, because let's face it, the body is a bit of a nuisance, and finally becoming and that our rationality, the sort of the liberal human individual, evolves into a machine. And this is the one, of course, that gets all the press headlines. But for me, posthumanism is political, and it's the challenge to what we've understood by the term human, I believe, comes from Michel Foucault. I think
French philosopher.
Yes, French philosopher. Died the end of last century. That he, in one of his books, The Order of Things, he talks about this character called man, in quotes. I'm putting it in quotes. Who, he says at the end of the book, it will hopefully disappear like the face on the edge of the sea, because he thinks that modernity invented a concept of man, and it's a highly unequal concept. That only certain people could aspire to be man, because it was defined by white Westerners, basically.
All right. So this is a completely different concept of posthumanism, really.
Yes, it is, and I think it's for me, it's the important one.
Okay. Well, I'm going to get Bucky to play a track now. He's playing a Chapman Stick. I've got getting him to say a little bit about what that is for the uninitiated.
Okay, this instrument is called a Chapman Stick. This one has 12 strings. It's sort of like a guitar and a bass all wrapped up together. It was developed in 1969 by a guy named Emmett Chapman, Southern California. and he took off the guitar part of it, so it looks like just one big guitar neck, and it's played by tapping. My right hand taps the lead strings, which are tuned to perfect fourths, and my left hand taps the bass strings, which are tuned to reverse fifths. And I'll give you a little example of that. I'd really like to dedicate this song here to a Valentine's that I couldn't be with tonight because of this show, which is wonderful. This goes out to Karen and her daughter Jamie and Herman.
All right, what's the song called?
The name of this song is "Are You Going With Me?" It's a Pat Metheny tune.
Okay. Thanks. That was Bucky Muttel being enhanced human. I'm Grant Bartley. You're listening to the Philosophy Now radio show on Resonance. We're doing a little fundraising at the moment. So there's 3 ways I got here that you can give Resonance money to help support their great work. You can text RZFM14 to 70070 by text. You got to do RZFM14 in the pound sign in either 5 or 10. Then you can use your credit or debit card on resonancefm.com and click on the donate widget and follow the instructions, or send a cheque to Resonance FM at Resonance 104.4 FM, 144 Borough High Street, London, SE1 1LB. Thank you. Good stuff. Right, we're talking about humanism and posthumanism and transhumanism, and we've had a few definitions, but we're going to get into the ethics of our self-evolution, if you like. Blay, you wrote to me in the email that the possibility of us enhancing our evolution through technology is the greatest intellectual challenge facing humanity. I think that's a quote from you. Why do you think that?
Oh, well, that's quite simple, really. I think understanding the physical world has been quite a challenge, right. And the biological world, it's clearly slightly more difficult to understand ourselves. Right. We haven't done quite so well at that, but we're solving a lot of the problems now. In particular, we can now scan living brains. we can do some quite advanced research on ourselves, but this is an order of magnitude harder than understanding ourselves.
What is, sorry?
The problems of transhumanism, because we have to take decisions about our future selves, which could be very different. The technology,
our descendants, we could affect our descendants irrevocably. Really.
Could be very different.
Yeah.
And actually, to motivate the ethics, I'd like to pick up on what Debra said about the politics, because that's really important here, and the listeners need to think about the politics. I was at a meeting, a transhumanist meeting earlier this year, and a speaker, a famous TV personality I probably shouldn't name, gave a program for extending human life indefinitely. And I should emphasize for the listeners that technology is science fiction. Aging and death is still a problem. We haven't solved that one. But he believes it's solved, and a lot of people in the movement think that there are people alive now who'll live to be 1,000 and so on. And as part of his spiel, when the questioning got difficult, he turned to the audience of mainly postgrads and a handful of journalists and said, how many of you would like to live forever? And of course he got, an overwhelming vote, yes. But that was an ill-posed question. What he should have said is, how do you feel about living a normal lifespan, but your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren growing up in a world where some very wealthy Californians, because he was sponsored by a Californian fund, have indefinitely extended their lifespan, and they've used that extended lifespan to further increase their wealth. And we're living in a world where wealth is becoming more concentrated, and some of the wealthy are using this wealth to extend their life and so on. This is an important political situation, and I don't think it's science fiction. It's happening now, and people really need to say whether you want to grow up in a world like that, or your grandchildren to grow up in such a world.
David, what did you want to say in response to that?
Just to respond to that, I think that one of the fears of transhumanism, posthumanism, is that there'll be an elite who can afford to buy the technology that makes them more intelligent, that makes them more successful, and this kind of stuff, right?
Well, not everybody can afford all technology.
Well, no, but you can make the same argument about smartphones, right? You could say, before smartphones were invented, there'd be an elite who can afford Apple, whatever's, and they'd be able to communicate more rapidly, and they'd have this and that, and they'd be able to access their dictionaries on the fly, whatever. And therefore, there'd be this super race of people with smartphones and who'd run ahead of everyone else and get some kind of weird hierarchy. But you get all kinds of feedback, you get all kinds of... It depends how expensive the technology is. These are all questions that aren't even vaguely answered yet, right? If it's a simple pill that you pop.
Okay, so you're probably saying maybe all this worry is a bit sort of premature, perhaps.
It could work in different ways. It could lead to an intelligent super elite, but it could equally lead to something like a smartphone.
Debra, what's your take on this?
I think that, personally, I wouldn't want to dispense with my body for a start, and I'm not sure that I actually want to live forever.
No.
I think that ethically, again, I'll say, I'll repeat that we still have the same ethical problems we probably had 100 years ago. First of all, that we haven't yet learned how to deal with having bodies. We're very bad at having bodies. We're embarrassed by our bodies most of the time. And I think, one of the things I would want to see addressed is that we learn to live with our bodies and learn to understand our bodies not as ending at the skin, but as being as complementary, if you like, with technology. That technology is a part of us. It always has been a part of us.
So how is people going to learn that?
I think that we need to start thinking about ourselves differently. I think we have moved into a new way of thinking about the body, in that we have the technologies which digitalise us. We used to think of our bodies as simply organic, so we're a collection of organs that kind of worked together in some sort of harmony, and very often didn't. I think what we've begun since the mid-20th century, at least, to start thinking about ourselves, particularly in terms of DNA and genetics, as a kind of computer program, for want of a better way of putting it. We talk about ourselves in terms of genetic inheritance now, as opposed to, it used to be the discourse of blood. We used to talk about blood. We now talk about genetics. We understand ourselves somewhat as digitalised. And I think that I'm not going to propose what our new ethics should be, but certainly we need to start thinking about us, understand how we're understanding ourselves differently, how science influences the way that we understand our bodies, and learn to live with those bodies.
So that's your preferred post-human direction, I suppose.
It certainly is, yes.
I would. One of the big areas is that we must have learnt that our applications of high science have a significant, unexpected bad consequences. Why are, say, genetic engineers not being super cautious, especially in regard to something as complex, fundamental and ubiquitous as biology? Why do they pretend that they're not courting nuclear-scale hubris? Anybody?
Well, let me take that. I think we are being cautious. We're being particularly cautious in Britain, where there's a voluntary moratorium on human genetic modification.
But not around the world, though.
What happens in other countries is interesting. But even with this barrier, probably the best book in the area back in the 80s, Jonathan Glover, the book was called What Sort of People Should There Be? And I think that's the key question here, that in a nutshell, it's a very readable book. He says, stopping it, putting barriers up against it, is only temporary, because there will always be beneficial applications of human genetic modification, which will mean you'll have to keep relaxing the barriers. So we might as well face the difficult question now, and I rather agree. And since the 80s, I've seen examples of him being perfectly correct about that. I've seen people saying, you must let us create a so-called saviour sibling. In other words, a selected embryo to bring a child into existence, which will provide a bone marrow transplant for our already existing innocent sick child. And it's very difficult as an ethicist to say, no, we have a blanket restriction on this technology that could save your child. You tend to say, well, okay, we must forget our restriction because this is a beneficial use of the technology, and there are always going to be beneficial uses, so we'll have to keep backing down. And I'm afraid we really need a clear ethical framework about what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. In fact, to bring it back to present technology, again, I teach medical students, and they're all adamant that they would do everything in their power to resist abortion on the basis of gender selection. But there are places in the world where this is going on. We know it. And this is, if you let parents use these techniques, this is the sort of thing you have to worry about.
But this is, I mean, as you say, this is for an area that not many people would disagree that that's a fair use of biotechnology. I guess the question is, what are the rational limits or limitations on what we should allow ourselves to do as, humans?
I mean, it seems fair enough that you should prevent people inheriting, a breast cancer gene or something like that. I mean, all these kind of genetic fixes.
Sure, but my question was we mucking about with genetics, we're really messing about with a very highly complex, interrelated system that we don't really know that much about. It's like
but it's
playing
also
with fire.
We're playing with fire, but also the house is already burning down, right? I mean, we're in the middle of one of the issues I have with people who are against transhumanism, posthumanism, whatever, is that they view what we have now as some kind of static, perfect world that, will be irrevocably destroyed if we do something wrong with it. But it's something that's constantly changing what we are to be human, the human body, the human genetics.
Well, that's true, but the question is, what are the limits of what we should be doing? I mean, like I say, nobody would deny that, if you're having a child to help save her brother, that's fine, but there must be limits. Like having a child so that you can harvest their organs would be a bit dodgy, wouldn't it, for instance?
Yeah, I think that I want to go back to your question and kind of pick it apart a bit here, because I think, that one of the problems is with the way that science is done. And, it's not down to the scientists, really, to decide what use is made of their work. Basically, I mean, there are all sorts of problems, I have to say, with the way science is done, even in the laboratory, when you think about what gets funded. And particularly now, when there is more private funding than state funding in science, and so it's very, the ethics has to start there. With there are certain corporations that have a vested interest in developing certain scientific ideas, and so that there are a lot of others, potential ideas, that don't get funded.
So what should they allow and what shouldn't they allow to fund? What should be funded and what should be banned, perhaps?
I don't think I wouldn't want to say what should be funded and what should be banned. What I would say is that actually the whole system needs to be looked at. And I think that...
Which whole system? You mean the government?
Contemporary neoliberal capitalism.
Right.
Which puts a lot of power in the hands of certain corporations. I mean, we've been talking throughout this session about, the rich benefiting from technology and leaving behind, a swathe of poor people that will not benefit. And I think that the current system encourages laissez-faire development of all sorts of projects that simply, go ahead because the funding is there and because they benefit certain people, they benefit certain corporations is perhaps more
but I
point.
can't see that the revolution is just around the corner. So given the fact that things are going to carry on, this century more or less as they have been, or at least for the first half of this century, then what should our response be?
Why shouldn't someone who's made money in their company in whatever way choose to fund the research that they feel particularly interesting, such as keeping like a long lifespan or something like that, if that's their concern?
Because I think the interests are not just blue sky interests. I think that the interests are to further the interests of corporations.
Well, naturally, sure.
Yes, but then people will suffer, and whether I guess then you have to think about whether that matters, whether you think there's a trickle-down effect, whether you think that if loads of people if a small amount of people make money, then other people will benefit. We're into all sorts of very complex.
To paraphrase you, it's the same problem that we've had for a long time of advantages creating elites, and this is just another way that the elites can gain more advantage through their wealth to make them even wealthier. And it's the same ethical problem as that always, yeah?
I think in a nutshell, it's the same ethical problem that we've always had, yes.
Okay, Blay, you wanted to say?
Can I put a bit of a philosophical spin on this, given the name of the programme?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't deny the politics, and I think the problem of elites is real and now. But if you follow Bentham and Mill,
utilitarian philosophers
of the 19th century, then your guiding principle on, say, whether or not to allow a saviour sibling to be created is the maximum benefit to the maximum number.
Yeah.
On the other hand, if you followed Immanuel Kant, a German idealist philosopher, then it's just wrong to do this because you're using a person as a means, not as an end in themselves. So it's just wrong on his morality. And I suppose it's also worth remarking, I'm a secular moral philosopher, but most people get their moral principles, most people in the world get their moral principles from religion.
Right.
And a lot of the world's major religions have very strong views on this. They're not going to go for it. I think it's a shame that, in a way, the technology is running ahead of our ability to conceptualise the issues philosophically. We need answers, and there's too many unresolved philosophical questions behind it. You need to come down on one side or the other.
Well, I think you can also, talking about it all in general is tricky. You really need to look at specific issues.
I would agree with that.
You can't really answer it in general.
Well, unfortunately, we don't have the time. But one specific issue that I'm going to ask you, David, is if we use clever computers to design even cleverer computers, then growth in computer intelligence could become exponential, which means swing. What limits or safeguards should there be around the developments of artificial intelligence, if any?
Right, so this is the notion of the singularity, right? That if you develop,
it's
called the singularity. Yeah. It's one of the sort of features of the singularity, so-called, that if you can, it becomes a self-accelerating thing. That once you get beyond a certain, you could say, I design a computer, and then that computer designs a faster computer or better, smarter computer, and then you get a whole chain of computers that in turn design even more intelligent computers. At a certain point, you're going to get a sort of acceleration of intelligence that leaves us all behind. That's the sort of notion of the singularity. So.
Shouldn't there be limits on what we do in artificial intelligence in that case?
Well, so there's two ways to approach this. One way of approaching it is to say, well, maybe this is a problem. Maybe we can model this in computers. We can do computer models of the singularity itself, build sort of little programs and get them to create copies themselves and explore how it works and what sort of parameters are, how we can make it safe and so on. The second way of looking at it is to say, well, what we really need is to understand what's going on inside the computers that are intelligent, so we can see how they're making their choices about the world and this kind of thing, so we can design computers that are friendly, even if they're a bit more intelligent, unless that's okay, right?
Right.
And the third point is that, well, we're so far from getting to the singularity, in my opinion, that it's not something that when we've got a few computers that look a bit like it, then we can start to, we'll start to understand where we are, and we can start to address
So we're so far from real artificial intelligence, it doesn't really matter.
Or even if it's in 20 years, then in 20 years' time, we've got a computer that's almost as smart as us, then we can start having a conversation about it.
Okay, we're going to talk about some other consequences of this stuff in a minute, but now I'm going to get Bucky to play another song on this Chapman Stick. This is called Chameleon, is that right?
Yeah, it's a Herbie Hancock tune.
Herbie Hancock, okay, guys. Thanks, Bucky. That was Chameleon by Bucky Muttel.
By Herbie Hancock.
By Herbie Hancock originally.
Interpreted by me.
Okay. This is Grant Bartley from Philosophy Now magazine. We're on the Philosophy Now radio show on Resonance. And they want me to announce that you can give them money, and please do. It's text them at RZFM14, followed by the pound sign and either £5 or £10 to 70070 to donate via text, or go to the resonancefm.com website to donate from the donate widget, or send checks payable to Resonance FM. To Resonance 104.4 FM, 144 Borough High Street, London, SE1 1LB. The future is in your hands, guys. And we're going to talk a bit about the consequences and stuff of what we're doing for our future now. So I have with me Debra Shaw, David Gamez and Blay Whitby, and we're talking about the evolution of humanity through technology. So let me ask, what do you think it's realistic to think will happen with human enhancement or technological enhancement? On what sort of time frame? Blay?
Well, I'd like to point out that it's perfectly possible now. And in one area, people know all about it. The listeners will be only too aware that the Olympics are coming up this summer, and we now know an awful lot about how to make people jump higher, run faster. We can actually develop different types of muscle. We could, in fact, select embryos at birth to make them super athletes, and we can certainly give them lots of drugs to do this. So the idea that human enhancement is some science fiction possibility is clearly wrong. Right. We know how to do it now. And in fact, we've taken the attitude that to do this is cheating somehow. It's a strange attitude, because you're allowed to develop your muscles and your heart and your speed through extensive training, through lifelong training. But intervention, more technological intervention we regard as cheating. Well, that's okay. We've taken that view. I wonder if people want to take that view about everything, but we don't take that view about intervention in the case of illness. And there's a very hazy moral line between enhancement and therapy, and we know that we're blurring that distinction. We know that we give breast enlargement operations on the national health, for example, and that's presumably regarded as therapy rather than enhancement.
Well,
but there is this grey area.
Perhaps you can say that if you can sell an enhancement as a therapy, then it's okay. Yeah.
Except in the case of athletic performance, because there any medical enhancement is at the moment regarded as wrong. Of course, we also know that it's so readily and easily available that there'll have to be extensive resources put into trying to catch cheats, and they won't all be caught. We already know this, so we already confront human enhancement technology in that area. So I think it's not in the distant future; it's now.
Deborah, what did you want to respond to that?
Yeah, I'm glad that Blay actually mentioned illness, because one of the interesting problems we're coming up against is how you define death. Why is that a problem? Oh, it's a huge problem, particularly if you think about the United States. You can actually cross a state line and be alive in one state and dead in another. Because the definition of brain death is changing all the time. In fact, there's.
I was going to say, put your redneck joke in here somewhere.
Yeah. If I had one. Sorry, I'm afraid I don't.
Sorry, what were you saying?
So that we actually have a problem at the moment in that because of medical technologies, we actually can keep people alive beyond the point where they were thought to be alive even 20 years ago.
Okay, why is that a problem though?
I think it's an interesting conundrum rather than a problem. I think that once we have problems defining. I mean, if you to put some point in history, if someone dropped dead and didn't appear to be breathing, they were dead. Okay, I know people got buried alive and all this sort of thing, but it was much simpler. Right now, we have a conundrum, which is that if we cannot define what it means to die, then it reflects on what it means to live.
Yeah. Surely there's room for sort of vagaries and doubts in a lot of things, isn't there? I mean, it's the fact that we can't say, okay, at this precise point you're dead. That doesn't create a big practical problem in like 99.99% of.
Well, it does when you have problems of whether to turn off machines that are keeping people alive. For instance, when you have medical insurance which can keep you alive, or you don't have medical insurance, so hard luck. Where keeping people alive on machines is. Also connects with this idea of uploading brains into computers, which Blay has talked about, the Extropy Institute, Humanity Plus, all these organisations. This is one of the things that they're talking about. Also, as far as the kind of enhancement is concerned, I just want to say something about this idea of sportsmen and women enhancing themselves with drugs. I find it quite amusing, this whole debate, because they're accused of cheating, and you have to say, well, what is the optimal human that is supposed to take part in these sports without any enhancement? Where is this human? Can you point to this person that is, unenhanced?
Yeah, so you're basically saying there's a sort of arbitrary line between what's considered cheating, good enhancement and bad enhancement.
Yeah. That's exactly what I was saying.
Backing up what Blay is saying.
It's quite arbitrary line.
Exactly, and it connects to that whole debate about what it means to be human in the first place.
All right, David, I want to ask you, because you're into computing technology, what do you think will be happening in the near future with the advancement of computing technology? What's sort of on the horizon?
Just like to make one small point related to the previous points, then I'll say one thing about that. Is that there's a strand of thought within philosophy and computer science and robotics that a large part of our cognition, if you like, is distributed through the tools and through our environment. Right. Sort of this notion that if I want to remember something, I don't necessarily store it in my head, I write it on a piece of paper. And so our basic human ability to think and act is all very dependent on our environments, and those environments have been massively enhanced, right, through the internet, through all the technologies, through radio communication, all this kind of stuff. So already enhanced, and as we keep developing technology, however, whether we fiddle around with the human body or not, we're always going to be enhancing and changing the way we think and act in the world. So it's not like we're again, it's going back to this notion that we're in a pure state and then suddenly we're going to change the human, if you like. We're already...
But I would say, in response, there are some things we know what happens when we do them because we've had, hundreds of years of doing it.
Well, like the internet? Or?
No, in terms of, if you exercise and you're going to develop your muscles, or if you take these substances, you're going to have these effects, but you know what the side effects are. Whereas if you're doing bioengineering or something like that, this is something you don't really know what the consequences are.
We haven't got a clue, right? And it's like people developing the first steam engines to pump water out of the mines, right?
But it's not like that because the situation is exponentially more complicated and the outcomes are exponentially more difficult to deal with.
But the difference between the limited ambition of pumping water out of the mines with a condensing engine and sort of steam-powered railways, I mean, that's, again, it's a massive shift in what became possible with one sort of increment in technology. So probably with biotech it'd be the same in 100 years. God knows where we'll be.
Well, hopefully we'll be still alive, not goo that's been reduced by nanotechnology.
So can I make a small point about you asking about future tech? So one of the ones that I find interesting and may be possible is this notion of uploading ourselves into brains, because the technology into computers, because technology for that's quite close. You can now preserve a brain and use a sort of scanning microscope to sort of take very thin slices and scan each slice into the computer.
It kills the brain, but that's the price you pay for immortality.
The idea is that when I die, I'd have myself uploaded, so I'd have my brain preserved, these fine slices, and what's lacking is the speed of processing these images into an actual functional brain, and the actual hardware to run that brain in real time is missing. But that sort of technology, 20 years, I wouldn't be totally amazed.
You think in 20 years we'll be able to upload our minds onto the internet?
That's a technology. We won't necessarily be able to get the brain running again because we'll have scanned it in, we'll have it all in our computer, but we're no good at reviving brains that have been dead 5 minutes. So that's another question.
Yeah, but these sci-fi predictions, they always over-optimised.
Oh, sure. No. I'm not an optimist, but I do think that since we're almost at the stage of getting complete brain into a computer now, we're just lacking the hardware, which is we can almost scan a mouse brain in, and we just lack a few tricks to get it fast enough. Basically.
Okay, Blay, what did you want to say in response?
I think the technology is still at an early stage, but I have to say I don't share David's or many of the extropians' intuitions about this. To have my personality and memories put onto a computer doesn't feel like survival to me. I mean, it clearly does to some people. It feels like me dying and there being some sort of copy of me based in silicon. That's just my intuition about this. It's obviously not everybody's intuition, but I think I'd just like to share with the listeners that it doesn't feel like immortality to me.
No, and I have to add there that what would a brain be like without a body? I don't think we actually, yet understand how, removing a brain from a body, how it might not actually be interested enough in its environment to actually communicate.
You do understand that because we have people who are locked-in syndrome who have no control over their body at all, and they can still.
So it'd be like being locked into the internet.
Yeah, exactly.
Sounds great, doesn't it? You can surf anywhere you want. You just can't do anything.
Science fiction has dealt with that. Yeah.
All right. I was going to say, isn't this posthumanism, transhumanism, isn't it just another type of utopianism with all the pitfalls associated with that sort of, the future's going to be great sort of attitude? Or it could possibly be a dystopianism, if that's your humour. Or I think you called it a cult, didn't you?
I have to be careful, because some of my best friends are transhumanists.
Okay.
But very often they have cult-like features, and there is a high degree of utopianism. It's a new technology-based utopianism. A lot of these people see the technology as solving all our human problems, and the lesson of previous technologies is that you can solve certain problems with technology, but you generate some other ones, and still underlying it all is our basic humanity. And that's why I kind of agree with Deborah. These are old-fashioned ethical questions. They're questions about who benefits and who loses. They're questions about whether or not we would freely choose this without pressure, without commercial pressure and so on. They're really quite old-fashioned ethical questions. But what's interesting is, of course, the technology is now pushing us. It's like David says, he's not that far away that we actually have to answer these questions. We can't leave it in the field of science fiction any longer.
Actually, what I wanted to say was I think that the 21st century will be the high point of technological development before the resource and population pressures push so hard against environmental factors that human culture starts stalling or collapsing quite rapidly. So, if in the second half of the 21st century, our global civilization starts to really hit the fan, how relevant does it make all these concerns?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. I mean, I think the interesting thing about the singularity, for instance, and all this talk about that we're going to reach a stage where we intelligence is going to be redefined, etc., is that perhaps when it happens we won't even recognise it because be so far removed from what we understand by intelligence that we won't know that it's happening. I think another scenario is that it might happen when an AI might reach the point of the singularity, but the rest of us will be scrabbling around for what's left of the resources on planet Earth.
Yes.
So it, in that sense, becomes quite an irrelevance.
So you got a super evolved robot shooting off to Alpha Centauri while we try and preserve our atmosphere, for instance.
But I think it comes back to we don't really know what's going to happen. We just got to suck it and see, right?
So just go forward. So I guess the question is, what should we do now?
Suck it and see.
Is it?
I think we need to take some very hard decisions about distribution of this technology, and we need to look very carefully at the rights parents have, because in most liberal democracies, parents have a lot of responsibility and a lot of rights. They get very little support, which is one of the reasons why they're interested in the genetic makeup of their kids. And I do know people who seriously argue, write in their emails, just as every parent has the duty, not the right, the duty to buy the best education they can for their kids, so they've got the duty to buy the best genes they can for their kids. And that worries me a lot.
Okay, thanks. Okay, we're near the end of the programme now. Has anybody got anything they want to plug to the listeners?
Yeah, I would very much like to plug the Free University at Occupy. There's a new Occupy building, which is the School of Ideas. It's in Featherstone Street in Islington. We're running free university courses there. They are, if you have a look on the School of Ideas website, I can't remember. Schoolofideas.org, I believe. But Google it. And look up the free university courses. Please come along.
Okay, and what's your website, Bucky?
It's muttel.com.
Right, and you'll get that from the podcast from the Philosophy Now website. I'm Grant Bartley. You've been listening to the Philosophy Now radio show. My books are The Meta-Evolution and Love, Solitude and Destruction. You're available online. Please buy them. You can go to Facebook, Grant Bartley, and bye.